Welcome back, everyone, once again to another truck request video. This is a series where us as the community get to choose what truck we talk about next for the base game. And today on the plate right now is the Derry Longhorn 3194. I'm actually engaging in upvoting as well. I take part in looking at your votes that you cast in the comments. So please go down right now and cast a vote for the next base game truck that you would like to see in the next video. And the most upvoted comment will be the next one we feature on the following truck request video. Anyways, moving forward here, thank you guys so much for the participation and stuff like that. It's been great. This is a great series for me to kind of like retouch on some of these old vehicles. And it's a good time to touch on the Derry Longhorn 3194 because I have some hot off the press information for you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. First thing I want to say about the Derry Longhorn 3194, it is a vehicle you find in Alaska for free. It is a mission that you pull out of a river, and you can essentially do it two ways: the begrudging way of pulling it straight up the hill that you drive down to it, or just marching it along the river and then up the bank and then back to the garage essentially, and it's yours for free. So that's really nice. Moving in here to the garage portion, it does have always on all-wheel drive, always on diff lock, 52-inch heavy tires. You'll see why I have all terrains. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it has the always on features. It was not always this way. When it first came out, I believe it was just always on all-wheel drive. And then later they added the always on diff lock as well. So thank you, Sabre, for that. Awesome stuff. Engine sets, it has the Westline V12 M900. This is shared with the P12, the P512, the ANK, the P16, and I think a couple other vehicles as well. 210,000 torque, like I said. It's for this vehicle, it is not that great power to weight wise. I think this is a little bit deceiving right now because this vehicle is actually really heavy. So I believe this power to weight should probably be around, honestly, maybe a C plus if you were to ask me, or maybe a low B minus. But moving forward here, we'll talk about its gearbox options, and then I'm going to show you guys some information I just stumbled upon that was from the community, essentially just talking about some things they noticed in the files, and we'll move forward. Balanced gearbox 20%, fine tune 60%, all-wheel drive penalty, high range is 30%, and off-road is the 40% all-wheel drive penalty. Now, what is an all-wheel drive penalty before I go into this new information? An all-wheel drive penalty means your vehicle has a percentage of increased fuel burn when all-wheel drive is active. So in this case, the balanced gearbox, when you have all-wheel drive activated, your consumption value goes up 20%. And then this one goes up 60, 30, and 40 respectively. However, the Derry Longhorn actually doesn't have an all-wheel drive penalty, and you're probably wondering, what are you talking about? It literally has always on all-wheel drive. Well, actually, there is a bug in the files, and some folks are talking about this on the official Discord. If you guys would like to say who you are in the comments, please leave a comment and say that was you talking about it. There was a few people talking about it. I don't want to mention all their names, but they were basically speculating on whether or not this does have an all-wheel drive penalty at all because of the dead axle. And I guess there's a bug involved with the dead axle and always on all-wheel drive vehicles. So essentially, the vehicle doesn't know that all-wheel drive is activated, even though it's actually activated in-game. And of course it is. Everyone sees that in the game. The axles are all powered except for the dead axle. This does not apply to switchable all-wheel drive vehicles with dead axles. It's only all-wheel drive, always on all-wheel drive vehicles that have a dead axle. So essentially, what I'm trying to tell you is, and Corhone found this out, actually, he was the one that kind of looked into this and found out that it was because of, it's basically a bug with this vehicle alone. And there's actually a line set here that I'm going to show on the screen that basically is kind of showing this. But to my understanding, my limited understanding of how the files work, I'm more of a guy who essentially just trusts the files, but I verify through just putting in massive amount of testing. I really want to see if those things line up, and usually they do. And I'm going to show you some examples here and show you that they do line up. And the always on all-wheel drive on this vehicle has no penalty at all for any of these gearboxes. But keep in mind that each gearbox has a base consumption. So I still would not use the fine tune. I probably would just use the high range or the off-road gearbox for this vehicle respectively. You could use this, but I think high gear is pretty huge for just ramping up and getting that 25% bonus. So I'm going to use this for these two gearboxes here, because essentially now I get faster gearbox settings or faster gearbox speeds with 0% all-wheel drive penalty, as if I was using a special gearbox or an advanced special gearbox. So I'm going to play some clips here with 4 vehicles that you're going to see pull weight up a hill, and I'm going to push those vehicles to either failure or almost failure going up this hill, to where essentially their gas consumption is reaching, I would say, close to max peak. And you're going to see here that the 4 vehicles I'm going to test here is the P12, the P512, the ANK, and also the Derry Longhorn 3194. The difference between those, well, the thing they share commonalities is they all have the same top engine. The thing they don't share is some of them have different gearboxes. Some of them don't have all-wheel drive at all, so they don't suffer from an all-wheel drive penalty at all. And then the other one has an always-on all-wheel drive. And then, of course, the P12 just doesn't have an all-wheel drive penalty because it has a special gearbox. And you're going to see the consumption values from the 3194 actually line up with those who don't have always-on all-wheel drive, or they have a special gearbox, which has 0% all-wheel drive penalty. Now, if you look at the video I'm showing on screen, the ANK, its consumption is rather high. And the other two are around the same place as the Derry Longhorn 3194 with this same engine. And what actually should happen if this did have an all-wheel drive penalty is the consumption should be pretty much in line with where the ANK is, but it doesn't. It actually should be even higher if it was to go through a test of driving down a certain map or a certain road in SnowRunner. You would actually see the average burn values of this vehicle much higher than the ANK. And the reason for that is because the vehicle itself has lower power to weight. So basically the engine has to work much more hard to move this weight and weight it's carrying than the ANK. I've actually done a video on this. It's called Power versus Efficiency. Please go check out that video. I show 2 examples of a heavy weight vehicle with low power to weight and a high power to weight vehicle, essentially pulling the same load, same hill, downgrading engines. And you see that the average burn is higher on vehicles that are heavier that share the same engine. So this is what you are supposed to see. However, you're not seeing this. The ANK actually got up to like 7.1 gallons per minute burn. And Derry Longhorn just tapped above 5.1, 5.2-ish, which is relatively close to what the P512 and the P12 had. So essentially what's happening is there's a bug where the vehicle itself doesn't know that always on all-wheel drive is locked in. So you have no penalty essentially, which is an amazing thing, because even though I don't believe this vehicle is crazy efficient, it actually makes it much more efficient that you can have a high range gearbox with 0% all-wheel drive penalty, or any of these gearboxes essentially. So that is a huge find. So thank you guys so much who found this out on Discord. If you are one of those folks, please type in your name down in the comments so I can recognize you in the comment section. And also thank you Corhone as well for finding out why. Moving on here, the stock suspension, there's no raised. That's not what you can do. You can actually put down the drop axle. I probably wouldn't do that because it's taking pressure off of weight driving into big double tires that are heavy down here. Tire sets, you're noticing I'm using the all-terrain doubles here, the Jats, and I'm going to talk about kind of why I'm using these, or I could use Lord Power, which I have used in the past. These are actually really nice too. The reason I'm using these is there is a video I made called Power Struggles No More, where I downgrade tires to allow the vehicle to pull more weight. And if you actually go back and look at the portion of the video where the Derry is actually pulling all that weight up the hill, and some of those trucks that I just showed you on screen were actually failing, it's because I have the all-terrains on here. And I actually showed this in the video where I pull similar weights up a hill with an OHD, but the thing is the OHD grip the earth so much that the actual engine power can't turn them against the grip coefficient laid down on the earth, essentially. So what happens is if you choose a lower grip coefficient, it'll actually break that stall of the tire and allow you to just kind of give you enough grip to keep moving up the hill. And these are areas where I think you kind of need to pick and choose. If you plan on pulling something up a hill and you know it's going to be a very hilly area, I would downgrade to an all-terrain tire. If you know you're going to pull in a flat place where there's a lot of mud, similar to like North Carolina or Bellazzar's Glades, I would say OHDs are a good option. Later in the video, you're going to see 2 examples where I'm in North Carolina with OHDs and it's working wonderful. I'm having no lockups because I'm just in mud and I'm using the higher grip coefficients to basically claw through mud better. On the other hand, I'm in Almaty pulling 3 slate blocks with a high saddle 6-slot trailer. And at this point, I know I have heady loads. I know my grip is going to be good on those rocks because Almaty has good grip coefficients on rocks for season 13 alone. And I know that I'm most likely going to axle freeze because there's not a lot of mud, but there's a lot of dirt. And I know I'm going to be gripping on that dirt. So I want to essentially not have axle freeze, pulling up all that weight out of those little strip mines there. So that's kind of where you need to pick and choose how you outfit this vehicle. It's either going to be an all-terrain tire if it's a flat area, or it's going to be a all-terrain tire if it's going to be somewhere you're going to pull up weight or pull up hills. Winches has the advanced heavy winch, of course, spare tires. I would actually leave this on because you can't put a crane on the back here. Sadly, if you could, oh my goodness, I would use this much more because of it's just an awesome vehicle. Pretty high snorkel, so you can get across some rivers, and then has no frame add-ons here other than the high and low saddle. Something I do want to add before we move on here. If you like to use these colors that you see on the videos, I have the Mac Defense green and also the desert colors here. I can actually kind of show these on the screen, see if I can pull these up here, edit. Okay, so there is the color scheme for the desert camo. This is a military vehicle, so it kind of looks good on this. And then also, here's the Mac Defense green. You can pretty much just stop the video right now and then go ahead and alter this for yourself. I really like both these colors. I use them a lot on my normal playthroughs, so you can go ahead and take those for yourself. So it doesn't have any add-ons other than high and low saddle. I don't like the saddle placement. I'm not going to lie to you. It does catch trailers. And there has been an argument that the vehicle is so heavy, and it's double the weight of the A&K, that the vehicle will just teeter forward and you won't really lose that much steering control. I would actually argue that some of those clips I've seen were with 0 weight in the trailer. And of course, yes, you're going to teeter forward because the vehicle itself is rather heavy and its CGs are set very low. So of course it's going to teeter really far over and you're going to regain your control, your steering. However, when you have loaded weights in the back, like 3 slate blocks, it's a different story. And you absolutely need your steering control because the problem with the Derry is it doesn't steer very well. It does have good suspension properties. It does have a low set CG. I believe like 3/4 of its weight is actually set down here. And I think there's a little bit of weight up top here, but most of it is set down here. It's a very stable vehicle. It is something that I think you should consider. So you'll see me pulling the high saddle 6-slot because I want to not contact as much back here with the blue trailer, the blue sideboard semi. I don't think it's a really good candidate for high saddle, not going to lie, just because other than the high saddle 6-slot, because of it's just not very high off the ground. There's no raised suspension. There's no active suspension to get this higher off the ground. And if you do catch snags, it doesn't have a lot of power just to muscle through it, right? Kind of like the 605R has, super heavy tires and then has a lot of power to weight where it can kind of, if it does catch, sometimes it just muscles through the surface, but not so much in the Derry Longhorn 3194. So that was a pretty long garage tour. Hopefully I explained how this thing doesn't have an all-wheel drive penalty, essentially. So thank you guys again so much for finding this out. It's a wonderful thing that even after 5 years of playing this game, you find out new things about trucks. And that's what I love about it, man. There's so much in-depth things that you can find out in SnowRunner. So thank you all once again. Now let's go talk about how I felt about this vehicle when I first started and how I think it stacks up here in 2025 and how I think it'll stack up here moving forward in 2026 and also into Q1 2027. Everyone's first experience with the Derry Longhorn 3194 essentially is the mission in White Valley, Alaska, where you pull it back to the garage and then it's basically yours. It's very iconic, similar to that of the White Western Star in Smithville Dam, Michigan. Now, I tried to pull it up the hill that you actually come down to meet the truck and pick up the task. It was a very hard pull to get that thing up that hill. A lot of vehicles nowadays can do it, but if you're playing chronologically, it's kind of a rough pull to get it up that hill. There's a couple things you have to do to get it up there, and it can take quite a while, I'll say that. Yet I found a little bit later and on subsequent playthroughs, essentially, that you can just drive this vehicle down the stream that it's found in, and you take it down there until you find a point where there's no guardrail to get up onto the tarmac, and then you just drive it up through that bank, onto the tarmac, back to the garage, and it is yours. After that point, you basically just upgrade it and take it out, put a trailer on it of your choosing, and drive it. Alaska is pretty easy. There's not a lot of slopes. The Derry Longhorn 3194 can handle things pretty well there. Now, my issue with it is mostly its maneuverability. It doesn't have a good turning radius. So basically, this is going to cause issues when trying to make sharp turns or also jackknifing the trailer just to get it positioned differently. These are all things you need to have, especially when you're hauling from a saddle position, because you're essentially elongating your truck, and having good maneuverability is such a plus. Along with that downside, which I did note on my review, another thing I did note on that review as well is its front overhang. You will bang your chin and you will soak up some damage on the engine. It can take some damage to it, but you will have that happen. It's just something about the Derry that's basically has been there since the start. Another thing you will see damage, and I don't see this actually very frequently, but it does happen, is you'll damage your gas tank. And that's just from going over bumps and stuff like that. I've seen this happen, a little onesie twosie damages here happen, but nothing crazy, but just something to note there. On the other hand, some things I really like about the Derry Longhorn 3194, it has a huge fuel tank, and we just learned it doesn't have an all-wheel drive penalty, even though I do think its consumption can creep up into those early 5s there, but honestly, it's not too bad. I'm going to say, and I did say on my review that it had varied fuel consumption. I didn't say high, I just said that it could creep up there, so normally its range is actually rather good. One thing I think is its standout is its stability. And also, I'm going to reference its stability and also its suspension flex. It's not something like a 5600 TS where that thing looks like a caterpillar crawling over obstacles, but the 3194 actually has some flexation and it helps keep it grounded. So with that low sitting weight, I also need to add that it is double the weight of an ANK. So that weight equals traction and also good flexation on its suspension with having that weight set low are all good things in the game of SnowRunner. Early on in gameplay, I tended to shy away from the 3194 just simply because it just didn't have add-ons. I think the maneuverability and basically every time I would have to turn, I would have to do the old Austin Powers turn where you're like kind of stuck in this corridor and you're backing up at like 32-point turns just to get your trailer and truck turned around going the opposite way. It kind of annoyed me, honestly, so that's kind of like the highlight of why I really didn't use it much. Other than that, I believe the Derry Longhorn 3194 is actually a pretty decent truck. If you look back at all my tier list here, I usually rank it around the mid tiers, and that's probably where it's going to stay moving forward on my next tier list. Also probably moving forward most likely in up to 2027 Q1 when the year 5 pass concludes. The thing is about the Derry Longhorn is now that we get more trucks with bigger tires, stronger engines, more add-ons, the Derry kind of is the truck that just gets power crept and then just gets swept underneath the rug. And the great thing about this truck request video is that I actually get to use it more because if I'm being quite honest here, I haven't used the Derry Longhorn 3194 in a long time. There is over 100 vehicles in the game. Most of them are now DLCs. The base game trucks are now outnumbered by DLCs. That's how many DLC trucks we currently have in the game. So I tend to just use what's new, and the old things tend to just collect dust in my garage. Moving forward, I'm going to actively try and remember to get this thing out of the garage and test it, especially on a live stream setting. I really would encourage you to do the same. Just try to get it out of the garage and get it moving. I know you can't overstack, it doesn't have a crane and all those things, but it can move some cargo for you. Just remember, If you're going to go up a hilly area, go all terrains. If you're going to go in a flat, muddy area, go OHDs. And that is essentially all I have for you guys today. Please go into the comments and leave me a comment on the next base game truck that you would like to see next, and the most upvoted comment will be the next installment in the series. I really hope you guys have enjoyed the video and potentially learned a few things along the way as well. So until next time, y'all, God bless and stay upright.